Welcome back to Bear Era fans. We've got an excellent live stream for you today. It is almost draft season. Yes, less than 1 month until the NFL draft. Some people feel like it can't get here soon enough. Some people feel like they need a little bit more time. That would be me. But regardless, it's going to happen when it happens. We are going to get you as ready as we can for it. We're going to run through some offseason movement just to catch you up on where the Bears are. Some comments from Ben Johnson about offensive tackles, some of the strengths and the needs of the Bears and where they line up, and then some of our favorites, and of course, your questions at the end. But before we get to all that, Kieran, I know you've been grinding away on tape as well. How are you?
Yeah, I spent the last week, had surgery on Monday to remove my tonsils. So I spent the whole week in bed watching tape and writing up different reports. And it's been a different one this year because normally you just talk about it a bunch and never release any of them. So like it's nice. I've been sharing it with you and Mike and stuff. And look, might put little snippets out, but it's really for when it comes to draft time when you see some of these guys get picked, so you actually know what you're talking about rather than looking at what other people say. So yeah, it's been a full week or two here of just fully immersed into all these draft prospects and kind of what actually fits for the Bears. And it's not always just the big sexy name that you see across social media that everybody seems to link with teams because they're there in people's mock drafts.
Yeah, for sure. And it is funny when you start digging into these player pools, and we'll do that a little bit later on in the show, how thin some of them can be for your team, not for the entire league in terms of what your team already has, what they need, whether there's a veteran there, what their system or their style is. And you get down to it and you're like, oh, everybody says there's 8 defensive tackles we could be looking at. There's really like 4 and maybe 3, depending on, what you believe about Dennis Allen and his proclivity to pick smaller defensive tackles. But before we dive into all that, we're going to catch you up on where the Bears are right now in the offseason in terms of most of the way through free agency. They may still sign a couple of veterans here either before or after the draft to fill holes, but most of those guys are in the door, and that leaves us with needs that need to be filled through the draft primarily. And that also gives us a pretty good idea of priority as well as in terms of when those guys were signed, how much they were signed for. It's really a confidence meter from the Bears in terms of how much they think they're going to play and be contributors on the frontline units, and then how much we're just looking at depth or youth after that. So, Kieran, why don't you start us off? Talk about the free agency class, talk about the major holes that got filled, and then we'll start talking about some of the ones that are left and remaining.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because we've kind of stood pat a little bit. Obviously, we spoke about in our last stream some of the main trades that happened. Um, in terms of DJ going, but also Khalif Raymond coming in, and we've heard like different quotes and stuff of what Ben thinks of him, and also the reason why he came to the Bears. So again, that's one of your depth receivers. You probably need another one there. Obviously, there's a big shift on the offensive line. I don't think there's like massive holes in terms of bodies because like you have 3 guys to fill a left tackle position, but you probably don't feel great going into the season about any of them. Now Ben Johnson did speak about Braxton Jones and how his body looks much different than it did last year. So that'll be interesting. And people do have to remember that that was a pretty horrific injury that he had to deal with. And Bears just thought it was better to shut him down. So it'll be interesting to see where he's at. Obviously, the center position, you got your starter in Bradbury once Drew Dahlman announced that he was going to retire, but that's a 1 year deal. So that's going to obviously be a draft need and might coincide with this particular class. But the obvious ones are the defense and all over the
Yeah.
defense pretty much. You mentioned the defensive line. They brought in a bunch of defensive tackles and pretty much like all your kind of stopgap 1 year guys, even some of your starters from last year, like Grady Jarrett. Probably, I know he signed a multi-year deal, but really it's a 1 year deal now. Same thing with Javon. So there's a lot of prove it at defensive tackle, but there's a lot of bodies. Like you're still gonna get guys back like Shamar Turner, and are you going to play him on defensive end or defensive tackle? Dio Dengbo, are you going to play him a defensive end or kind of your hybrid defensive tackle? So there's a lot of questions on the defensive line. There's a lot of bodies, but there's not a lot of obvious starters. It's really probably Jervon and Montez are like the only ones that you'd say, yeah, they're probably going to start for you in week one. Grady Jarrett probably as well, but again, you would like to see some differences there. Linebacker, you've obviously added a couple of bodies there, but there's still two guys in TJ and obviously Noah Sewell are both suffered horrific injuries at the end of the season, so you don't really know their status. You probably need a linebacker. Corner, obviously you lost Nashawn Wright, but there's more guys coming back than what you've lost, so you're probably okay there. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears do target a corner as well because they'll want more quality opposite Jalen Johnson. But the obvious one then is safety. Obviously, Kobe Bryant, we mentioned this last week. He's the key of your free agency class. He's the one that you spent the most amount of money on in the free agency class. And you need his partner because he's the only one really there. All of it else, everybody else is like backups, kind of utility players, special teams guys. You don't really have your partner for Kobe Bryant at safety, and that's going to be one that they're going to have to address in the draft and probably twice.
Yeah, and I think all the lines of the defense feel the same. The front line, the middle line, level 1, level 2, level 3 of the defense all feel the same. There are one or two pretty good players at each level or each position group. You need 3 or 4 or a succession plan for some of those guys, especially in terms of contract length, age, all kinds of things running out. And so none of them feel settled. All of them feel like an opportunity. I would not be surprised, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the podcast, if the Bears picked a defensive tackle, a defensive end or edge, a linebacker, a safety, a corner, outside or nickel, either way, they can really go wherever they need to with the strength of the draft because they do have needs all over. They're not going to fill them all. They have too many to do that in one draft, even if they trade down and get some picks. They're going to run with some of these guys, some of the free agents that they brought in. I think, again, Kobe is probably the preeminent free agent. They did sign him, first to the biggest deal. They believe he is going to be a linchpin in their secondary. And I think that's actually pretty well founded. I think the way he plays, the style he plays, the physical nature of the way he's been a safety so far in the league fits really well with Dennis Allen. So I like that fit a lot. Linebackers, like again, they're taking up space. Are either of the linebackers either, free agent or the re-sign? Are they going to keep you from drafting a quality linebacker? The answer is no. And it's the same with the defensive tackles, and it's the same with the defensive ends. So the defense is very much like that. And then it's an opportunity on offense as well. Center, you mentioned, but, wide receiver core. I keep drafting wide receivers in mock drafts and then going, nope, we have Khalif Raymond. There's already 3. But that doesn't mean you don't need 4. You do. That doesn't mean you don't need more return versatility. You do. So if, again, the Bears get to a point in the draft where there's a wide receiver they really like that's slid, that has return versatility as a wide receiver 4 or 5, they're going to pull the trigger on that. So, I would not be surprised by an all defensive draft, but I would kind of be surprised by an all defensive draft because those opportunities are going to come up, whether it's for center, offensive tackle, which we're going to talk about right now. There's just, the board is very open for them. So Ben had some interesting comments about offensive tackle, obviously at the owners meetings that are going on right now. There's coach media availability. They can kind of do a half hour with local beat reporters. And in Ben's time doing that, he specifically addressed left tackle. He talked about Braxton, how much more he's healed from last year, how much better he looks. Jed Wills, good player before he was injured. We'll see. Can he return to that form? I think everybody hopes so. Is it a 1-year prove-it deal just to see? Yeah, it sure is. So again, do those guys keep you from taking a tackle early if one you like falls? And my answer is no, for the obvious reasons we've stated, but also for the economic opportunity. If you can get a starting left tackle who you believe is going to be a starter in the league for multiple years or multiple contracts, 2 contracts. We'll call him a 2 contract player. If you can get that player in the first round at 25, it is a tremendous value. Those players are usually off the board in the top 10, certainly in the top 15. Are there starters all across the league who have come from other tiers of the draft? Yeah, the Bears have started 7th rounders for a while now. It does happen. Is it likely? No, it's not likely. So if you can grab a player you believe has the potential to be a 2 contract starter at left tackle at 25, you do it just because of the value, how much money it will save you, and how much better you would feel going into the year knowing that you have, and again, somebody that doesn't have to start right away, but the eventual answer at left tackle at 25, tremendous value. One of the 5 most valuable positions in football. You just do it because of that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I put out a post this week when Ben Johnson spoke about it. We've heard Dan Roshar talk about it as well, that he doesn't really know the avenue to solidifying left tackle at the moment. And look, they brought in Wills, they brought back Braxton, they have Theo. They're hoping at some point in the year that maybe Ozzy can get back on the field. But like, again, that's his injury is so difficult to know that the Bears can put out that he's progressing really well in terms of what the recovery is supposed to be. But the problem is with that injury, you actually don't know until they're fully healthy and how it's impacting them. And often those types of injuries, even if you are fully healthy, you're not back to the same level you were for maybe 12 to 18 months. So that's where you have to really decide what you want to do kind of moving forward, because if that's 12 to 18 months, you're getting close to, I know I know we've only drafted him, but you're getting close to the end of his rookie deal. So then it is one where you have to figure out what your answer is going to be. And look, at the end of the day, it's the 3 most important positions on the football field: quarterback, the guy who protects the quarterback's blind side, and the guy who gets after the quarterback. Um, the Bears have one of those 3 positions solved. So that's why if one of these tackles does fall and they fall to 25 and you're like, this is our guy moving forward, then I'm all for you selecting an offensive tackle in the first round this year. Like, I don't, we said that we coined this very well last year, because we said where the Bears were, there was a drop off very close to where the Bears were drafting last year. And our last stream before the draft was worst case scenarios of where the top 8 or 9 guys that everybody was speaking about, if they all got selected, and they did right before where the Bears picked. And from there, the Bears went, we're getting a good football player, and went after Colston Loveland, and ignored that they needed a defensive end. They ignored that they needed a left tackle, because typically those are the positions you go for when you're in the top 10. And they went for the best available player. The 2 guys that we kind of mentioned in our stream, I believe last year, was, I think you brought up Emeka Egbuka, which he's been very, very good. And then we brought up Colston Loveland. And that was just us being like, who else in the first round is just a good football player? That's how I feel at 25. Like, if you don't move back, just pick a good football player and you'll be fine. It's the same situation with Luther last year. He was a good football player. Everybody was surprised that you went wide receiver, but I bet everybody's very, very happy now that you made that decision. And that's why you can't chase in the draft. You have to just pick quality, because you don't know what your need is going to be next year. So you need to, when you have these top of the range picks in the first round and you have a limited supply of draft picks, you just need to look at your board and be like, who's the best guy? Obviously, it's not going to be like quarterback or anything like that, or running back in the first round. But like, at that point, you need to just go and be like, who is here that we know is a good football player, and pick them. That's what the best teams do. And that's what the Bears did last year for the most part. Obviously, there was one or two mistakes, which always happens. But that's why we talk about last year's draft as being a success, because they just, when we did our review of it, we're just like, other than maybe two or three picks, a lot of the selections were logical decisions and sound decisions. And that's what I want to see from them this year. Whether it's an offensive tackle, edge, defensive tackle, linebacker, don't care. Just make sure that's a good football player at your first pick, whether it's 25 or elsewhere.
Yeah, I would agree. And teams that, again, as Bears fans, we are not used to the Bears picking in the bottom end of the first round. They have not been a good football team for a long time. So they've been picking in the middle from 15, sometimes the top 10. We're not used to 25 to 32, which is always a very sort of title variable portion of the draft. There's a lot of change. There's teams looking to move up, there's teams looking to move down. And sometimes you're a team that's very good. I look at a team like the Ravens, who've been good for a long time, and they have a lot of picks down in the late 20s. And they have followed the strategy of pick the best football player left, like regardless of whether it fits our top need or not. And I do see a lot of fans get locked into that, saying we cannot come out of the first round without X. And I don't care what X is. If you have that mindset, you're in trouble because maybe all the X's you want are gone. Right? Maybe it's safety, maybe it's defensive end, maybe it's edge, maybe it's defensive tackle. It doesn't matter. If three are gone and you're picking at 25 and nobody's picked, for instance, last year, a tight end, or nobody's picked a safety yet, or whatever, weird stuff always happens in the draft. You have to be flexible enough, especially in that back end of the first round portion, to make hay, or else you're not going to be a good football team for long. That's how good football teams fall off. They reach, they fail to refill the coffers, and then they end up not being a good football team and getting picks back up in the top 10 or the top 15. So as long as people are flexible in their mindset about what could happen, I wouldn't actually even be surprised by a trade back, right? Somebody comes up, somebody has something they want at 25, some player they love is sliding, and they say, hey, we'll give you our pick at the top of the second round to have you slide back. If the Bears are looking at the available players, their pool of who they'd be happy with, and they can slide back 7 or 8 spots, still end up with the player that they like, I would see them doing that because they might think that's not a big drop off for them, or the player that they really covet is probably still going to be available. Go ahead and do that, right? You're not locked in, as long as I know it's hard not to make a pick on the first day, but other than that, for the long-term health of the franchise, could be a really good thing. So want to address the first super chat we got because it's very timely. NB, my contribution to hiring Trevor for Bear Era now that he's a free agent. I know he's a Bucs fan, but I think we can convert him. Better than that, I reached out to Trevor today, as a matter of fact, and he is going to be on the show within the next 2 weeks. He was our first ever guest on Bear Era and said, hey, man, you can have me on anytime. So he has agreed in his newfound prosperity of open time to spend some of it with us, and we're thrilled about it. So we will use your contribution to directly fund however we compensate Trevor for that. So very, very timely. Keep sending in questions, super chats, everything else. Mike's going to be collecting, and we'll answer most of them at the end. But for now, I want to do a quick little pivot. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but I know you've got it on tap because you brought it up, and it's a really good one. Worst case scenario. So we've all had this scenario play out for us where you're doing a mock draft and you get to 25 and there's nothing. There's nobody you like. Yeah. And so mine is, I'll start and then you can go with yours. Mine is all Clemson guys. Like 4 out of the 7 available guys in the slots are the Clemson guys at the top of the draft. I don't love any of them. If I had to pick one, it would be TJ Parker. I'm not a big Peter Woods fan. Again, at the top, like I think Peter Woods is a good football player. I don't think he's necessarily a first round talent in this draft or others. Avion Terrell, don't really need him. Good football player? Yep, he's a good football player for sure. Is he a pressing need at 25? Do you feel great about that value? I don't feel great about it. I feel okay about it, right? And that's my sort of, it's like Blake Miller and Peter Woods and Avion Terrell. There's all these Clemson guys just clumped up in the top 5 or 7 available. And I'm like, oh, is anybody going to offer me a trade down at that point? And typically not. You got to sort of stick and pick. But if the board shakes out that way, and we'll know by 15 or 20 whether it is or not. That to me is the scenario that I went through last year where you get there, you get to 10, and you're like, well, okay, now you just got to pick somebody you like, because in terms of value or slot or need position, none of it really lines up right now. And you just got to go with somebody that you're really sure is a good fit for your football team.
Yeah, I've gone through multiple mock drafts where there's like there's 3 or 4 guys that I would like to follow, but like you said, just recently here, there's some of the guys that I would like at even at 25. I feel like I could get if I was in the late 30s.
Yeah.
Like that's just the way it is. Like the I like TJ Parker. I do. I think he fits well for what Dennis Howland does, but in terms of him being like a first round talent, like I have him when I was doing kind of my work on edge rushers, I had him at the top of the second round. And I think that's like where, look, if you move back to like, I don't know, 33 or 34 and you're taking TJ Park, I'm fine with it. Like it's no big deal. Like again, same thing. If you pick them at 25, like I'm not gonna be going crazy. I'm not gonna be going crazy, but I'm also not gonna be like you got your like bona fide like 15 sack a year like edge rusher. Like that's not what you have. There's not really like Peter Woods. I liked him early in the process, but as you kind of watched more, it's again, it's a player that I think he's nice. He's like, I think he would fit, but again, he's not, I don't think he's going to be like your game wrecking defensive tackle. But then again, I look at this class and I don't see anybody that I get extremely excited about at that position. That fits into what I think the Bears are going to go for. But like, there's a lot of kind of pros and cons of guys. Like I know a lot of people don't like it, but like some of the safeties in terms of like Dylan Tiananmen is one that if he fell, I'd be very happy with. But most mocks that you do, he doesn't. But again, we know that in all these mock drafts, like most of them are wrong because it's based on different boards that are out there, and then it kind of the algorithm goes based on what the majority of people are picking and things like that. So that's why you see such a contrasting thing. And my biggest pet peeve when it comes to draft time is when people get mad at a team for picking a player that they saw going later in mock drafts just because they think that this person should be picked in the 30s because in the mock draft sims they get picked in the 30s. But yeah, I think my worst case scenario, it's hard at 25. I think my worst case scenario is more of if the player that I really want, I think I could get at the top of the second round. Like when we talk, obviously the key is like people talk about edge rushers. Like one of the guys I just really like to watch is Malachi Lawrence, but I think you can get him in the second round. Well, actually, there's been a lot of talk of him going into the first round, but he would be one that I'd be perfectly fine with. The problem is some of my favorite edge rushers, the Bears aren't going to draft because they don't fit the style of Dennis Allen. So, like, I love watching Cassius Hell from Texas A&M. He's fun, but he's too small, and the Bears aren't going to draft him. So I don't get my hopes up for that. But yeah, it's a tough one because I think it's really hard to. I think it's you can't really fall in love with a prospect at 25 because you don't know.
Right.
It's not the same as when you're at like 10 or 12. You can be like you can kind of scope out kind of who it is. I think the worst case scenario for me is just if you get to that point and you're not sold on one of the edge rushers and then the top safety is gone and a team doesn't want to move up and you're stuck at 25 and have to draft someone. That's my worst case scenario where you're drafting someone that is in a bucket of about 7 or 8 players where you would have been happy picking anyone. And it's not that you're like, oh, we really, really want this particular guy.
Yeah.
that you would have been satisfied with like 7 or 8 players. I think for me, that's the worst case scenario. And the more you look at it, the more I hope that the Bears can convince other teams that they want the guy that they're going for, or the team behind them wants someone that they want. Like that's what I hope for. So like if a Omar Cooper or a Jordan Tyson falls, convincing a team that somebody else that's further down that someone's going to take them before you and you need to trade up with us, do that.
Yeah.
That's what I hope that they're able to accomplish and get some more picks, because I really like the kind of from where the Bears are, like at 25 to like 60 to 70. There's a lot of guys there that really can improve this football team. But the problem is you don't have enough of those picks, and you go from 25 to what was it, 57?
Yeah.
Like
57.
you'll miss out on a lot of good options before that. I would love if you could trade back to like the first 5 picks of the second round. That's my ideal. I think that would work so well, because I think you set yourself up really, really nicely there to where you could probably get the edge rusher that you might have been targeting at 25. And then I think also it's you really can go for who the best player is at that point, because no one's going to get pissed off with you if you're selecting a linebacker at that point, even if it's the best available player. So I think
Yeah.
I just come to what we said last year. Wherever you select that first player, just pick the good football player. Don't force something because you feel you have to.
Yeah, and pick the one you have conviction about in terms of fitting your program, both as a person, as a player, whatever skills they have. I'm with you. There are a lot of sort of tiers or buckets, especially with like the edge rushers, where you feel like if you trade back 7 or 8 spots, it's not just that you can get the one you want, it's that you could get the next 2 or 3 that you wanted, but none of them sort of distinguish themselves on tape to be, oh, I got to get this guy at 25 as opposed to get this guy at 35 if I trade back. So there's a lot of that in this draft. And then there's a lot, I'm with you. There are a lot of good picks that go off the board if you're sitting there waiting for 57 or 60, or, you trade it back a little bit, you're waiting for 65 and you're watching all these players could help at all the levels of the defense we talked about at the opening of the podcast go off the board. Not that there aren't good ones behind them. I'm getting to the point in scouting now where I'm down into those second and third tiers of defenders. And I'm still finding guys that are, absolutely good players who I would like to see on the Bears. But again, you don't have a ton of picks back there either. There's a big gulf in the middle of this draft.
Gap.
Yeah, you just sit there for 100 picks and watch everybody go off the board. So it'll be really interesting to see how Ryan Poles maneuvers. And there is the specter of 2027, which is going to be a very good draft. We've been talking about this draft in the draft community for 3 years. When all those freshmen hit the scene 2 years ago, everybody was like, when's the first time they're available? Oh, 2027. All the quarterbacks that pushed this year. Dante going back to Oregon, whatever it was, it's like, oh, so that's next year. It's Arch and Dante and whatever. So again, in terms of getting people to trade up, those picks are going to be very, very valuable. And I don't think you're going to see a lot of teams really charging to get rid of next year's picks. Sometimes they do. Every scouting person that I have talked to, whether it's in a team or out of a team, has said they're more valuable. Whereas you might, go up, around typically from year to year. If you trade a, second this year, you're going to get a first next year. If you trade a fourth this year, you're going to get a third next year. They said this year it might be straight across, might be fourth for a fourth, because we're not giving up any extra capital for next year. Nobody's going to want to do that. So that's going to figure it into it as well. But I would like to see the Bears get some more picks in the middle of this draft. Not sure how they could do it, but I would like to see them do it because there are a lot of good players that could help there. So that gets us through what the Bears have done in the offseason, what Ben said about the offensive tackle situation, just to kind of, I don't know, it almost feels like insulation for Bears fans. Like if they pick a tackle at 25, if that guy falls and they are convinced he's the guy, don't freak out about it. It is a good value financially. Of course, the player has to work out, but that's the same with any first round pick. If you pick an edge in the first round and they bomb out, it's no better. So again, there are players like that. I don't want them to reach to do it, but again, I think the flip side of that question, what's my best result, is one of the 2 or 3 guys we really like that don't slide very often in mock drafts are there. right? Whether it's Thieneman or Mesidor or, a lot of the guys that are already off the board by the time the Bears pick. If one of those guys slides, great. If one of the very athletic tackles slides and the Bears like him, cool. Also awesome. And even if they're not going to pick him, like you said, that's trade bait, right? If Jordan Tyson's falling because of the soft tissue injury, if they can convince people that they might pick him, which is possible, I suppose, maybe somebody will throw you picks for him. And if that's the case, again, now you've accomplished two of the things you want. You're getting back to a range of picking where you feel more comfortable with a wider range of prospects, and you're getting those extra picks in the middle of the draft. So it is possible to swing this one to your advantage. They're going to have to be vigilant. They're going to have to be active. They're going to have to sort of keep their head on a swivel throughout the draft. And if they do, they can come out of this draft, regardless of what people say about its overall quality, with some really good players. So we'll see how that works. So draft strengths versus Bears needs. Now we sort of laid out the needs, all three levels of the defense. Be great to get an athletic young offensive left tackle, but I'm not sure that really lines up. A fourth, fifth wide receiver that has special teams return versatility or could step into the number 3 role if somebody gets hurt. There's a bunch of those guys in this draft. I think that's a strength. Corner's a real strength. I've been doing corners. We were talking about this pre-show. I've been doing corners straight now for 2 days, pretty deep into the corner ranks for this particular draft. And there's a lot of good players down through the middle. Typically right now on consensus boards, anywhere from 130 to about 175 for the most of them. A bunch of those guys are going to end up being starting corners in the league, and that's a deep corner draft. Safety, I used to think safety was really deep. Safety is deep if you're looking for all the roles, say like a 3 safety role. But if you're looking for specific roles, if you're looking for that, big time field roamer, free safety, there's not as many as you think. Even the guys that are a little bit more versatile, the kind Dennis Allen likes, what we call a true 2-way safety, much like Kobe, who can come forward from depth and support the run, but also is very comfortable carrying receivers down the field. There's not a ton of those. There's some good ones in this draft, but the pool gets a lot smaller when you start putting any number of stipulations on it. So I feel like that's strength. Inside linebacker is a real strength. There are a lot of good players at inside linebacker I like, and it's a Bears need. And there are players up high. There are players down the board. There are players that fit what they want to do, would help fill out the room, such as it is. I think inside linebacker is a place where we will probably see at least one pick for the Bears, no matter how many picks they end up with. I would be very surprised if in this class with their needs, they didn't pick an inside linebacker at some point. I have ones I like. I'm sure we'll talk about the ones you like in the My Guys target. Where do you see the strengths of this draft really lining up with what we talked about, the Bears at the top?
Yeah, I like the fact that when you said from looking at the start, when you were looking at the safeties, thinking that it was very deep and things like that, because I had similar kind of thought process on kind of things like defensive tackles, and then digging into what I really think that the Bears need in terms of, look, they still need both positions in terms of 3 tech, 1 tech, all that sort of stuff. But when I started looking at 3 techs, I'm like, well, there's not a lot that you can get that are going to fit what Dennis Allen wants. So I kind of veered away from a lot of those guys because there's really not many that I look at. I'm like, yeah, that's a perfect fit. There's maybe like 1 or 2. But if you want to get like your replacement for Andrew Billings, there's plenty of guys throughout the draft and even if you wanted that, like the smaller guys that it looks like Dennis Allen likes, there's guys that are that stature but are also able to take on double teams and things like that. So it's good for that one. I agree with you. Linebacker is the one where I spent, I think it was Tuesday and Wednesday last week, looking at the linebackers, and I was enjoying watching some of the early guys, and then I'm hitting to guys that people are like projecting like 3rd and 4th round. I'm like, I like these just as much. So it's like I looked at it, and when I put my kind of personal grades, and like I usually do pro comps based on traits, then a pro comp on a body type and things like that to see like what kind of matches. And like some of the guys where I was doing that are projected to go on like the fourth and fifth round, I'm like, I prefer how they're measuring up to some of the guys I was originally looking at that were projected like second round picks. And it's very interesting how that comes. You mentioned it, the wide receiver position is actually one that I'm pretty excited about in terms of getting a depth receiver. I If the Bears end up trading back at points and getting more picks, I'd kind of be surprised if they don't take a wide receiver in day three
Mhm.
somehow. They get a pick or two within that big gap of where they don't have 100 picks. If they get into that area, I think that's a really good sweet spot for that position. And then I lo- I spent a lot of time on the offensive line, and my basis was, look, we know the starters other than left tackle. So then I went through it while I was watching these guys and who mimics what the Bears currently have. So who would be someone that can match up to Joe Tooney? Who's someone that could either be the Drew Dahlman type center or the Garrett Bradbury type center? Who matches up to the way Jonah played, and then who matches up to Darnell? The Darnell one you're not going to get unless you're picking somebody in the first or second round. But the rest of them, there's guys throughout the draft where you can get somebody that very similar to the style of Tooney, to the style of both Dahlman and Bradbury. And also there's two or three guys that you look in similar styles to how of what they wanted in Jonah Jackson. And that made me quite excited that if you really want to bulk up the depth of your offensive line and just make sure that like if you get to a point where they're just the best guys on the board, feel really, really good about them.
Yeah, I think there are 5 or 6 centers in this draft that I like, and I can't remember a year recently where I felt good about more than 3 or 4.
Hmm.
So and that's for the Bears. That's not just centers overall, although I do scout for the entire league as I'm looking at the centers. I am particularly looking at, like you said, Garrett Bradbury's deal, not something that's going to keep you from picking anybody else if you like them better. And there are 4 or 5 guys down the board in the middle rounds that the Bears could go after that I think could be the heir apparent at center for this team and play really, really well for the bulk of Caleb's tenure here. So that's exciting. I know it's not sexy, but this draft is big on not sexy positions. It's big
Yeah.
on safety. It's really good at tight end. It's very good at center. It's good at inside linebacker. These are all the positions that a lot of
Who would have
people,
told you two inside linebackers can go in the top 10?
yeah,
Like,
that's people don't get excited about those positions, but you need them on football teams. You do have to create a roster that's balanced. And somebody said earlier in the chat, "Oh man, we already have too many linebackers. Howie, our Bears." It's not about the number you have on your roster. Having a number on your roster is not something that keeps you from picking a quality player. You want to have the highest quality players on your roster you can. Now, if you're just filling holes through the draft, sure, that's being absolutely locked into your needs and driven by them or pulled along by them. Not the ideal place. If you have 8 linebackers, but you only feel good about 2 of them, you need 3 or 4 you feel good about it. And if one falls into your lap at a place in the draft, I'm not saying prioritize it or push it over other positions, but if you're looking around, you have 3 or 4 guys, and the highest graded guy you have is an inside linebacker, and you need an inside linebacker in terms of quality, not in terms of quantity, you pick them because again, none of the guys on the roster, even right now, are going to preclude you from picking a guy you think is going to be a quality starter in the league for a while. And there are a bunch of those guys in this draft. We'll talk about some of them. So it's not the sexiest draft for sure. Not a lot of quarterback talent, not a lot of talent up high in terms of blue chip positions.
running
Start
back.
Yeah, running back, not super awesome. Again, down the board, you need a second or third running back that can contribute, play special teams, is really good in the passing game. Those guys are there, but you're picking them for
Yeah.
niche roles. You're not picking them to be a 1A. I don't bell cow doesn't really exist anymore, but in terms of the Jonathan Taylors of the world, like it's love or bust in this draft, and that's
Yeah.
it for like big time offensive weapon difference makers that are going to be the sort of face of the offense. There's other guys that will contribute, make no mistake, but it's going to be the sort of Tyler Algier role. It's going to be the Jordan Mason role. It's going to be the, and those guys are very useful. They get signed every year, and you have to fill out rosters, and, running back, one of the most injured positions in the league. So you need good guys and good depth. But in terms of the star power at running back, not there. I would say the same thing a little bit with wide receiver. It's 2 or 3 right up at the top, and then there's just a lot of guys with a lot of talent and a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're not going to be good players. Some of them aren't the flashiest at a flashy position. That's okay. Same thing with left tackle, right? There's a bunch of right tackles in this draft. There's a bunch of young athletic tackles who could be really good, and I think some of them will be. But in terms of like, oh yeah, that's the guy you're going to pick and play at left tackle against all the werewolves on defense in the NFL for the next 8 to 10 years. Not a ton of those guys in this draft either. So it's a sort of eye of the beholder thing. You have to put on a different set of glasses to find the quality in this draft, but it is there. It's a little bit farther down, and it's in a lot of positions that people don't typically get really excited about when they get picked, even though you need them to have a good football team. So with that, you want to go into some of your favorites at positions of need, or
Yeah,
you want to do
sure.
something else?
Let's do that. What position do you want to start with?
I don't know. Let's let comments pick. Comments, you take position you want to see us talk about first, and we will give you some of our favorites up and down the board at that position, and we'll kind of go from there. And the second most responses is the place we'll go next. But I would imagine people are probably going to start on defense. Seems to be what's dominating the offseason conversation in Chicago in terms of draft needs. But who knows? Maybe everybody's deeply concerned about the center of the future.
Do I have to guess? People are we have defensive tackles, the first one.
Yeah, it looks like DT. So,
Okay.
all right.
So,
You want to take 3 tech or 1 tech? And this is this is going to be where we have to differentiate the players we really like, and then again, what DA has picked historically. And I'll just carve that one right off the top. He has not picked a guy higher than what is the 5th round that's been over 300 pounds, like ever. So there is that in terms of DA has his types, both for defensive tackle and defensive end. They're not necessarily guys that we agree with. Like Kieran said at the top of the podcast, there's definitely guys we like watching play that do not fit his style. And you go, oh man, I love watching this guy. He's never going to be a DA end. Like, let's be honest. He's just not. So you want to take the big guys, or you want to take the penetrating guys, the guys that are 3 tech slashers?
I'll do the penetrating guys because they're a bit harder and it's probably a bit shorter.
Yeah.
In terms of like pure guys that I like, again, what you said, DA very likely not going to pick them. And again, I have most of these guys at the top of the 2nd round rather than the back end of the 1st. So the 2 at the top of the 2nd, obviously Christian Miller and Peter Woods. If I was going between them, Christian Miller is probably the most interesting defensive tackle that people are talking about towards the top end of the draft, because you can watch one game and you're really, really impressed, and then you watch another game and he looks confused at times, and it really depends on which matchup you pay attention to. Like there's times where he overshoots it. There's times when the tackles are right there to be made and he completely misses it. But then there's other times you watch it and he looks like what you want from your defensive tackle, like your dominating type guy. But again, he's over 300 pounds, so it's probably not going to be a DA move.
It might be,
and
we'll see.
Yeah. So like that's like that's where I don't think that it's going to be. He's going to be the guy that they're going to look at. I kind of had him more so as like your strong run defender, power based interior rusher, and when I was looking at it in terms of like a year one, I had him as like a high floor rotational starter. So again, he's not going to be somebody that just comes in straight away and is like your guaranteed starter. Like he's going to be sharing time. And it's going to be similar with guys like Peter Woods. When I go a little bit further down the board, there's a couple of guys. I'll mention the one that everybody seems to talk about on social media, which look, the reason why I think a lot of people talk is the interior pressures there, the penetrations there, but also the size matches up to what DA wants in Grayson Halton. He's about
Mhm.
round 6'2", 290 ish. Wherever you want to, wherever you want to look. And again, what I really like about him is like that explosiveness that he does bring, and the Bears need more of that. He brings the interior pass rush, the motor and the efforts there. And again, it's not like he's a liability against the run. Like he does shoot gaps well. But again, the problem is going to be because he's one of the smaller type guys, like anchoring versus double teams is obviously going to be an issue. What his play strength will be like at the next level, there'll be question marks. So like that is the issue for a lot of these like three techs that you're looking at, where if you're going for the smaller sized guys, there's always going to be that question mark that at the next level, how will they be able to deal with that kind of that pressure that's going to be put on them? Where some of my favorite guys actually are a little bit further down the board though. I'll mention kind of two or three, and guys in the chat can kind of put in who their favorite ones. But the guys that I enjoyed watching a lot, Zane Durant from Penn State was one. He was a fun watch. Again, matches. He's around 6'1", 6'2", 285 ish. Um, and he's one that I do think very similar to what I just said about Grayson Halton. That if you're looking for that explosion in the middle, he can give that. He's good in terms of his leverage, which is something I like, because I always say for a defensive tackle, I don't want them moving too fast, because ultimately when that happens, they end up overplaying things. So he was one that I actually really enjoyed watching. Didn't really know what to expect going into it, because there's been such a variance of people liking him, not liking him. Again, like I said, the weaknesses or the limitations, the projections for that are all going to be similar for these guys that you're trying to project for DA, just because they're a bit smaller, and trying to see where they're going to be. When I was looking at it in terms of scheme fits, it kind of fits perfectly where I was like kind of your 4-3 penetrating defensive tackle, or your 3 tech, and then aggressive defensive fronts emphasizing gap penetration was the other thing that I had him. And then again, for his first year, I said rotational defensive tackle, interior pass rush specialist, and sub packages, and then high energy defensive line rotation players, probably your first year. The other two guys that I'll mention very quickly. One, I've seen people start to talk about a little bit more, Caleb Proctor. Again, kind of small school guy in terms of southeastern Louisiana. I like him, but again, I don't know if DA will, because he a bit too tall? Is he a bit too big? Like he's not like one of these like massive humans in terms of like 330 pounds, but like he's just above over about 300. So again, he'd be like a day. What I thought was going to be a day three, but the more times you see people talking about him, you're like, okay, maybe he's moving up the board. But he's a guy that I really liked. And then the other one that I liked was Rayshawn Benny from Michigan.
Mhm.
But again, I don't know if that's gonna fit DA, because he might be a little bit big. But again, he was a guy that I looked at, high motor, good against the run, explosive, good power, good punch, and doesn't really get moved off, but also has a little bit of penetration at times. Pad level was an issue when I looked at him, but it was someone that I could see being a guy that you could take in the mid rounds that would have a successful career at the next level. But again, these are like 4 or 5 guys, and of that 4 or 5 guys, really two of them fit. And the two guys that I looked at that fit kind of what DA looks for is Zane Durant and Grayson Halton. And again, that's tough when you're going into a draft where you're like, there's two guys that fit the prototype, because that means you're probably not getting either one of them.
Yeah, more people, again, if they're looking for that role, are going to prioritize it. Halton's going to be a fascinating case study. I do think he is a fit for the Bears. I do think he is a fit for DA. I really like the tape, but again, there's scarcity there. So scarcity could drive him up the board, just like we see runs on offensive tackles. If you're looking for a penetrating 3-tech, Grayson Halton could be your guy, and that could happen as soon as 50 or 55. I've also seen other boards where people say, I'm a little bit more hesitant about the limitations. I think he could be down at 80 or 90. And both camps on either end of that spectrum will shout you down no matter whether it's too early or too late. He'll never be there then, or, oh, I think he'll still be there at 85. We'll see what happens during the draft. The draft is the ultimate arbiter of that. But I do think he's a fit. There's a couple guys that fit that prototype farther on down. Landon Robinson for Navy. The concern there is not necessarily the body type or the penetration, it's level of competition. He did destroy lower levels of competition, and of course the service requirement. You never know how that's going to go. And then way down the board, Skylar Gill-Howard, the guy that played next. The guy that played on the Texas Tech interior line. He's even more sort of skewed. Like the times when he penetrates and wins are amazing, but there are long stretches and other plays where he gets really washed out, more so than some of the other guys. Zane Durant, I have my worries about, because some of the penetration plays, the highlights are very high. He is a 0 against the run. He is not a good run defender at all. And that's from talking to people at Penn State. That's not like, I saw it on tape and I thought, was there something going on here? Because it really looks like he doesn't play very well in that phase of the game. And they said, no, that's that is what it is. You saw it the right way. I said, okay, good to know. And then way down the board, who is an athletic marvel. And again, you do see the flashes on tape, but they are fewer and farther between, is Jordan Vandenberg for Georgia Tech. Absolute RAS monster. And you do see it show up on the field. It's not just a testing workout warrior that never makes plays on the football field. Makes plays on the football field, doesn't necessarily make enough, but you're going to be taking a swing on him end of the draft. Somebody's going to take him around 6 or around 7, just based on potential. If we're talking about the other defensive tackle, I'm going to go back to the top of the board. Everybody wants to put Caden McDonald with the Bears. I understand. I think when you're talking about bigger, heavier set defensive tackles who are going to be guys that can control the run, 2-gap front, stand up to double teams if they need to, if you're going to take that guy in round 1, he better have some pass rush. And that's what everybody tries to project onto big tackles that they want to take high. And I say that in that way because Caden McDonald, like, is there some untapped pass rush potential? Yes. Has it been consistent? No. Do you want it to be if you're taking a guy that high? You do. Caleb Banks, great player, not a pass rushing guy, but there's serious injury concerns. Again, big guys with foot and ankle problems, always kind of a buyer beware for me. Somebody asked earlier, if he was there at 57, would you take a chance on it? I'm not a doctor. I don't have access to that stuff. I don't know. I would worry about it with his weight and a foot problem. It's just going to be a concern for me. Lee Hunter. I want to talk about Lee Hunter, the headliner from Texas Tech on the inside of the defensive line. I am a Lee Hunter stan. I know he did not test well. I do not care. Like, I go back to the tape and I go, because I watched the tape before he tested and I was like, I really like this guy. He went to the Senior Bowl. He had a very good Senior Bowl. I was like, I like this guy even more, maybe, if that's possible. He tests terribly, right? I don't really care how he tests because I go back to the tape, I look at the competition, and I look at what he brings to the football field. And I'll just tell you this, my rankings aren't out yet, but I'm going to be way higher on Lee Hunter than almost anybody I know. I think he could be one of the 5 best players in this draft. And I know people are going to shout me down and say, absolutely not. Let's take a look in 3 years and see if he's not a solid round 1 player. Let's just put it there. Let's not talk about top 5 or top 10. Is he one of the top let's just say 30 players from this draft 3 years from now. I think the chances are pretty good if he stays healthy, that's going to be the case. And I really like what he could do for the football team. Does he fit with what the Bears like? Now, he's much bigger than what DA has picked in the past. Do I think he could be a player the Bears could use for a long time to anchor their defense around? I certainly do. Do I think the Bears are going to pick him? I certainly don't. If he's there, same question for Caleb Banks. If Lee Hunter somehow floats down to 57 in a heartbeat, you're not going to be sorry about that pick. Run it to the podium. Like, I don't care how much you like, just look at his effectiveness on the field. Look at, again, the defensive tackles. Like you said at the top, there's a lot of numbers along the defensive line. None of those guys are keeping me from taking Lee Hunter, like, at all. So really like him. Big Citrus, Dominique Orange from Iowa State. Again, really good player. Is he a fit? Don't know that he is. Daryl Jackson Jr., same ballpark. Like him a lot. Dante Corleone from Cincinnati. I like him. He's quicker than a lot of big guys his size. He's a little bit farther down. We're talking borderline top 100, top 25, 125, depending on which boards you're looking at. And then a guy like down the board, there's two guys I'll mention down the board. Again, one just recently came up with an injury history, which is Xavier Harris, who is a massive human being. He's like 6'6", 6'7", 330, 335, something like that. He is a huge guy that can really move. Love him. Was super high on him. Came out recently. He's got some injury issues. That's going to drop him down. And then Chris McClellan from Missouri, not getting a lot of buzz. Really good player, like just a good player, SEC experience, defensive tackle, not a ton of pass rush, but again, where you're going to be picking him 125, 135, whatever, you just want a solid rotational defensive tackle who can be in there on the early downs, dominate his gaps, control the player in front of him, make sure that the run doesn't go through him. Chris McClellan's really good at that. So that's the defensive tackle board. I saw that the next position, somebody said center, I think. So it was like DT and C if I go back. So let's talk about centers because I'm actually really excited about this center class. I mentioned it earlier. I think there are anywhere between 4 and 6 good ones, and that would fit for the Bears, not just 4 and 6 good ones overall. I'll start off with these guys. Chase Bissonis was a guard for Texas A&M. A lot of people are projecting him to center and as kind of the top center in this draft. I wouldn't do it, not because I don't like Bissonis as a player, but because there are so many players further on down. I wouldn't push a semi-premium pick, a top 50 to 60 pick on Chase Bissonis. I like him as a player. I don't love him up there. And there's a lot of other guys down the board who I think are you said it at the top of the show, like a very similar value much later on. Connor Liu from Auburn is a little bit more of a sort of gap power center for me than he is a zone center. I like him as a player, but he's not sort of top of my list. It really starts with Sam Hecht, the center from Kansas State. I like his movement skills. I like his tape. He ran a zone scheme at Kansas State that's very, very similar to both the centers the Bears have recently had and the ones they have now, because if you don't know, the center they currently have, Garrett Bradbury, ran a zone scheme in college next to his former teammate, who is the current left guard. Sam Hecht has a similar kind of experience there. A lot of people are talking about Jalen Farmer as a possible center. I actually think the actual center from Kentucky is the guy I would take. So Farmer's not my guy, but Jake Slaughter's a guy I want to talk about. Got to see him at the combine on the field. Didn't test particularly well, didn't move what I would say particularly well. Again, standing next to all those guys, you turn on the tape and Slaughter just wins and wins and wins. He can reach a shaded nose. He gets outside on zone blocks and seals. He's got good size. He's not an eye test guy, I'll tell you that. Standing next to all the other interior offensive linemen at the combine, Jake Slaughter wouldn't stand out at all. And doesn't even really stand out during drills, didn't stand out during testing so much. His testing was good, but not great. You turn on the tape, he stands out. Like, he stands out in the system. He stands out in effectiveness. He's got good size. He's not one of these undersized guys, which is typically what you get in zone centers who require a little bit more movement. You get guys that are sometimes maybe 285, 290, and they're like, oh, maybe they can bulk up. Nope. Slaughter's got the size. He's got enough length to do it again. Centers don't have to be the longest players, but again, on tape against top quality competition, Slaughter wins over and over and over again. And right behind him is Logan Jones. Everybody in the upper Midwest familiar with Logan Jones, Iowa center, very good in a move scheme. Best quote I've heard during draft season is an anonymous scouting director from the AFC saying that guy plays like he's got 2 kids and a mortgage. And I'm like, that's what I want for my center. Like if I could have a description more perfect for my center, I'm not sure what it would be. I think Logan Jones would be a hand and glove fit. And then I really like Billy Schrauth, the guard from Notre Dame, but I also think he's a guard. He's a hell of a football player. But Jaeger Burton is the guy I mentioned from Kentucky, who's the actual center for Kentucky. I think Jaeger Burton's kind of where my list of centers drops off in this draft to where I would expect them to play any meaningful minutes, either later this season or lead off next season. I think Jaeger Burton could be that guy, but I think after him, somewhere probably around 150, 160, there's a drop, and you're starting to look more at projection guys or guys like Parker Brailsford, who's a little bit smaller, would need a year to bulk up, something like that. But that's a lot of guys. That's 4, 5, 6 targets going down just this year's draft that would work as zone centers for the Bears. That is an embarrassment of riches from one particular draft class for an obvious need for the Bears. I would be surprised if they didn't end up with one of those guys or a guy that they like as much. Again, could be a guard convert, sometimes a tackle convert. If you're talking about, tackles that might end up, we always get one, tackles that might end up playing center. Brian Parker from Duke is the one this year that a lot of people are talking about as a convert.
That's my guy.
Yep. Why don't you talk about Brian Parker?
Yeah, he's when I said earlier on that I went on the offensive line to look at guys that project as good players in behind the current offensive line. He was the one that I looked at and I'm like, he's gonna be good. He's gonna make it. In terms of, obviously he was a multi-year starter at kind of right tackle, but I think his future is probably on the interior. The thing is, he's one of those guys that you think when you watch him that somebody can go past, but no, his pass pro is so good. Like, he rarely gets beaten, and it's all with technique. It's with his hand uses. He's not always going to be like this physical freak that's the most like the best specimen that you've ever seen. But the one thing that I looked at is, you can tell from some offensive linemen, and I went back to think of like with Drew Dalman and stuff, like what was the key thing that people spoke about, and it's the IQ, the football IQ, the awareness, knowing how to handle stunts, twists, blitzes, all this sort of stuff. He was fine with it. Like, it's really, really good to see a guy like that you just know understands the position. And it's difficult to find. But then when I looked at the other thing, that I always had the Philadelphia Eagles game in my mind for what the Bears want in terms of that physical presence and being competitive, being tough, and basically wanting to go into somebody else's building and be able to bully them. And he's that type of guy. But when I looked at it and I said, I do all these kind of based on these one element is like the physical profile. One is like the type of school that they've gone to, that transition into the NFL. But when I looked at just pure technique, adding in with the intelligence and kind of the nastiness, like, I just keep coming back to, he would be a really, really good understudy for Joe Thuney. And he's the guy, when I looked at him, I kept seeing Joe Thuney for the way he played for the Bears. And I'm just like, if you had an opportunity to pick him, he could fit in at right tackle if he needed to. If Darnell went down or something happened, he could play right guard, he could play left guard. Because he had games at times when he had to play left tackle, but like, he's a guy that, kind of like with Thuney, if you put him anywhere on the offensive line, he'd probably be fine. And just watching some of these guys, when you do so much studying, as you know yourself, you see guys, you're like, he can only play right tackle.
Yeah.
He can only play right guard. He can only play center. Parker's, I don't want to say is my favorite player in the entire draft, but he's definitely top 5.
Yeah.
Like, and if the Bears picked him, I would be look if the Bears came away with an edge rusher and Parker, I'd be like, yeah, I'm good because because the I I think it's important because I think with Tooney, the age that he is, Jonah, the age that he is, you need to
Mhm.
find their understudies that's actually going to replace them. And I think if you got a guy like Parker, whoever goes first, whether it be Jonah or whether it be Tooney, he could fit in like a glove and you don't have a problem there. And that's what I saw with him in terms of you mentioned one of the centers, the Logan Jones. I was like, if you want a Drew Dahlman style center,
Mhm.
it matched perfect.
Yep.
And I was like, he fits like a glove for that one. If you want, I know they've only traded for Bradbury. When I It made sense to why they brought in Brockmeyer for a visit because he's very similar traits to Garrett Bradbury, which
Yeah.
is again, it's a lot of these things that we're hearing of players that are linked to the Bears or that they've had interest in or that they've watched closely. They make a lot of sense. And I mentioned earlier on, there was a couple of guys that it's not all kind of high level guys in terms of I don't know where this guy's gonna go, but again, similar enough to kind of Jonah. I don't know if you've looked them yet, but from Boise State, Cage Casey,
Yeah.
um, he's a guy I really like, and I could see him being like, if you had him as an understudy to Jonah, makes perfect sense in terms of stylistically how he plays, and that's what I looked at. The other one that I didn't bother with the offensive tackle on what they or left tackle for what they really want because I actually don't know what they want because you look at the left tackles that have played and there's been too many ones that are different. When
Sure.
I looked at Darnell Wright, the one that kind of jumped up, but the Bears are going to take him because he's a pure right tackle is Max Ianashore. He
Yeah.
was the
Sure.
one
Yep.
that he fit perfectly there. So like when I've been talking to people about the O line, I'm just like, if you want to make a Bears O line, just as they're understood, these are the guys that you pick. And again, if you came away with one or two of those guys, you're shoring up your offensive line for the next couple of years, and you should feel really, really happy about it. But yeah, Parker from Duke he'd be one of my main targets on the offensive line if you go that direction. And I think if you came away with him and Logan Jones like side by side, I think you're doing so much for the interior and also really stabilizing your future so that if Tooney or Jonah does leave in the next year or two, you're not impacting your quarterback because you're getting guys in that can do that job. And like we said, it might not be the sexiest thing going for interior offensive linemen that are like your backups right now, but
Right.
it's going to be hella important. And those are two phenomenal guys. And they'll be guys I'm praying do not head into the NFC North to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always players, you know this from watching tape, and this happens to me every year because Green Bay takes at least 2 or 3 guys that I
I'm
really
expecting
like.
it.
Always happens. And you're just like, "Please, please, please don't pick them," or, "Please don't wanna play against them for the next, twice a year for the next 10 years." That's when I see, Thieneman to the Vikings, Dylan Thieneman to the
That's
Vikings.
happening.
I
That's
know,
like
but I'm like, "Come on."
it's like Harrison all
Oh.
over again.
I know, I know, and I just don't wanna see it, but also I can't sort of unsee it. So you mentioned intelligence with the center, and, it's certainly something that Ben has talked about over and over again, and again, I talked about guys higher up, but a guy that is currently ranked further on down that I think teams are going to value more highly because of that one trait. Again, he does not pass the eye test. He looks like not a football player when you're right next to him is Pat Coogan, the center from Indiana. consistently talked about one of the most intelligent players in this draft on the interior offensive line. And look, the Bears have taken offensive linemen late, right? They took Luke Newman late. Speaking of his teammate, Matt Golban, the center / guard from Michigan State. They already have a relationship with him. He has positional flexibility. You're getting a 2-for-1. He can play center or guard. There's a lot of ties. If Matt Golban ended up being a Bear in the later rounds, I would not be at all surprised, and I wouldn't be unhappy about it either. He's a good player. So just because they don't do it up high, it doesn't mean they're not going to do it or shouldn't do it. Don't be surprised if we see interior offensive line additions as the offensive adds to this particular draft, even though they have so many needs on defense. All right. Looks like next position was wide receiver and then safety. And I think we'll probably cut it off after that. But I want to combine two questions here because there was one from earlier that said, if you got to be, said it's from SMAT1976 for $10. Thank you so much. Says, thank you both for this show. If you got to run the draft and give Ben Johnson a gift of a Cordell Stewart, Randall L. Hines Ward type guy, who would it be? And I know what my answer is, but thanks very much for that. We appreciate it. We appreciate you being here and supporting the show. I and somebody else said talk about wide receivers, so we kind of mold this in. If you're looking for that player, who would it be? And there's a guy in this draft that fits that for me. That is going to possibly be a value where the Bears end up picking, and I would not be at all surprised. Given Ben Johnson's needs on offense, that even though we are quote unquote set at wide receiver, that he wouldn't pull the trigger on this particular player. So who's your guy? Do you have one? Have I stalled long enough for you to think of one?
There's two guys I really, really like in this draft. Okay, one's high up and one's low down.
All right. Start with the high up guy.
The high up guy is the guy that has his name twice. Kevin Casey Concepcion. You know what Casey is, right? Yeah, he's a guy that I think a lot of people have been quite, I don't know, pushing down at times in this process, and I understand why, but he's a guy that doesn't just get open with speed. He finds his way to get open. I think he's a bit more intelligent than some people give him credit for. But I think he's a guy that I really, really enjoy watching. Again, it's not going to be a guy that the Bears are going to take. The one later that it was kind of annoying that it got released that the Bears had a visit with them, because it probably means that they're not actually going to take him, is Dejan Stribling. He's the guy I really, really like. He was someone that I was thinking, day three, perfect option for the Bears. Has the size, has the speed, I kind of liked everything. He was one of the early guys that I watched that I remember watching I think I was watching a game for Ole Miss during the year, and it was like, who is this guy? And it was one where I was like, if DJ goes and you want to take a swing at like an X style receiver, he's a guy I like. Like some of the points that I kind of brought up was like vertical ability, fluid in terms of his kind of hips, the athleticism, size is good, because you don't have a lot of that with bringing in Khalif, and then obviously Luther's not massive either, and Grom's big, but he's not kind of your kind of DJ Moore style. But then the one that I really liked at him was that it's the ball tracking, and also we've constantly spoken about different guys come up last year with these like big plays for the Bears, but like when you're watching Ben for the Lions, you always had like Jameson kind of coming in with these massive plays. And look, Jameson had such a good year last year, even without Ben. But it was always like at least once a week, like these crazy, like big play potential type ones in terms of being so dangerous in the vertical routes. And that's what I saw with Stribling, that I was just like, it would be so much fun. there's obviously going to be some weaknesses to his game in terms of can he be pressed and stuff like that? Can he be consistent to make the big play? But again, if he's like your wide receiver 4 going into his rookie year, like
Yeah.
I'm good. And I think he's the guy that I'm just like, sign me up. If you get one of those like fifth round picks and he's there, I'm just like, just take him. Take him.
Yeah.
He's a guy I really like.
I don't think he's going to fall quite that far. I think league opinion of him is higher than outside opinion of Stribling. But good news, if he ends up being a Bear, I know his agent.
Nice.
Because I reached out to her and said, "Who are your guys?" Right before we got to the combine, who do you have signed in this class? And Stribling was one of them. And I was like, "Oh, interesting." Again, not necessarily as Bear target, just a player I really like. I think he's a fantastic wide receiver. And I'll talk about the guy. Well, two guys up high that are very, very different. One in the spirit of the super chat question, the more sort of Randall L, Hines Ward, like type receiver. For me, there's one guy in this draft that fits that description. Well, there's two, but the one that I really like is Skylar Bell out of Connecticut.
Oh, yeah.
And he was Mr. Everything for Connecticut. Connecticut ran the vast majority, or 30% target share through him. Had the highest number of yak yards in this entire class of the draft eligible class, with guys with more than, I think, 25 targets. He had 800 yak yards. You want to guess how many more yak yards he had than the next most guy that's draft eligible this year?
225.
200, dead on. 200 more yak yards, just yak yards. 10-inch hands, inside, outside versatility, has played in multiple spots. There are guys that definitely only play one side of the field or only play outside, don't play in the slot. He's done both. Tremendous after the catch threat, one of the highest yak averages also in this class, not just the highest number of yak yards. Really tough, really smart. State UConn, despite getting big time bag thrown at him by big time programs, said, nope, came here, wanted to elevate this program. I'm going to do that. They'll find me anyways. They have. I'm not advocating for picking him, but if he starts sliding down, I would be shocked if Ben wasn't looking at him going, that's a really good football player who we can use in this offense for a long time, regardless of who else is here. Again, he has versatility, just like the offensive line you were talking about. Can play inside, can play outside. He can run down the field and win with concentration on the boundary. He can get crossing stuff in the middle, against man, against zone. He's just kind of got it all covered. And he's one of those really smart wide receivers that, both of those guys, Hines Ward, incredibly intelligent, was one of the best blockers in the NFL. Randall L, former quarterback, fully understood what his quarterback was looking at when he was trying to throw to him. Skylar Bell has that kind of intelligence as a wide receiver, plus a really nice physical game to go with it. The other guy up high, who is sort of more in physical type, like Stribling, is Bryce Lance, Trey Lance's brother from North Dakota State. That guy is, if you want to counter the North Dakota State threat in the division, and we've seen what happens to Green Bay's offense when their North Dakota State guy comes in, completely different offense with Christian Watson on the field versus not. Bryce Lance is that kind of guy. He's going to put fear deep. You talked about Jameson, fear deep in the defense. You cannot pack it in against an offense that is sporting players like that. And Bryce Lance will bring that. Incredibly athletic player, very good run blocker as well. I just talked about that with Hines Ward. Another player that, if he's there and he's sliding at all, now I don't think he will. I think the opinion league wide of him is pretty high, but if he starts dropping down and he's there at your pick and you're looking at it for the future and saying, hey, I could have Luther, Burden, and Rome, like,
don't be surprised. And especially if the Bears do move down from 25 and get second round and another pick in day 2, don't be surprised if the Bears pick a wide receiver with maybe like their last second round pick, because it has kind
we
of
saw it last year.
About.
We were not we were not expecting the Burden pick, and then it was like, we knew. And when it happened, I was not a huge Luther Burden fan. As you know, I wasn't anti Luther Burden, but I definitely wasn't where the Bears picked him. But I said, Ben knows what he wants, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to trust Ben. We all wanted Ben as the head coach. Ben is here now. Ben knows what he wants out of Luther. And it was a little bit rocky for the first half of the season. And then they got on the same page. Luther started to understand Ben, and we all saw what happened. And that was the point at which I was really glad I said what I said when he was drafted, because I was like, I don't necessarily love him. Ben knows what he got. He knew he wanted him. And if he does that with any of these guys, up high, down low, whether it's Stribling, there's one other guy, Eric McAllister from TCU. Now, he's a
Yeah.
little bit more limited, like in terms of he's not near as versatile. He is an outside wide receiver. He has inside versatility, but he didn't line up there as much. He can win from that alignment, but he is an absolute backside dig merchant. Like, he will destroy on that route. His ability to pull through contact and run up huge gains afterwards is how he gets yak, because he's a big guy, 6'3", over 200 pounds. I've seen valuations for him all over the board, from like 115 down to like 295. Like, people just don't know what to do with him. They either like him and think that his potential sky high, or they just aren't even interested in drafting him. So we'll see. But I'm like you, I would not be at all surprised if the Bears at some point, could be up high, could be down low, pick a wide receiver, because again, they have a good set of wide receivers. They can go into the season with what they have right now. That's not going to stop somebody from Ben from adding somebody he thinks is a weapon that he can just rake opponents over the coals with. So,
do you really think Ben's gonna let them just go defense?
nah, he's gonna get
he's gonna get itchy
jump.
and scratchy.
Yeah, whether it's offensive line or tight end. We can talk about tight end. We're probably not going to, because we don't have a ton of time, but safety is a position of need, absolutely, for the Bears. We laid it out at the top. This is a very good safety class. Again, they was their first strike in free agency to bring Kobe in. They have more needs than that, right? They didn't re-sign a bunch of guys. They had a bunch of age guys they didn't feel great about. They need to retool the safety room, and this is a very good safety draft. So why don't you pick one up high that you really like, that you think would fall into the Bears range, and one farther on down who you think would be a good fit or a good value, and I'll do the same.
Yeah. And I like the flavor of the month has always been kind of Emmanuel McNeil Warren. And he's a guy I like, but like don't love. So like, I don't know how happy I would be if he was to pick at 25. I'm complete opposite if it's Dylan Tiananmen. We've spoken about it in the last episode. Again, you got to see him up close and personal. You got to see the pro days, all that sort of stuff. That's wouldn't be a problem. There's a couple of guys that I do like, in terms of, again, trying to fit like what DA, or what we've been told,
Right.
DA wants.
Yep.
It's kind of tough. Like, you want somebody that, where if you're looking at them, is their best role going to be that split safety, the 2 high system, right? So like the AJ Halsey from LSU is a guy that kind of stood out to me. Someone probably second round pick that, like, I think he's pretty smart, well-rounded defensive back, and kind of makes a little bit of sense in that position. One other that kind of fit that mold for me was Genesis Smith from Arizona. Again, if you don't want your like stereotypical like free safety, strong safety, and you want those kind of split safeties, like, again, he makes a bit of sense in that regard. One of the other guys that I had, who was it? I think it was it VJ Payne, maybe?
Kansas State.
Yeah, he was, again, that's one where, if you're like, some people have spoken about him being quite high. Now, I don't think I would want to be taking him in like early to mid day 2, but like, he's a guy that definitely you could use as like a depth safety. If you pick somebody else and then he was the second safety that you draft, I'd be pretty happy with. I think he could definitely contribute early on special teams. He could be very good in the sub packages. if you wanted to move Kyler around a lot and then you wanted like a nickel hybrid, I think he could definitely do that job. Um, and those are kind of some of the guys that I think around the areas where I think the Bears might take a safety. I
Yep.
don't know if they'll take one at 25, but I think if you're looking at that kind of second round range, some of the guys like that I liked, AJ Halsey, like one of there's been like guys like Kamari Ramsey, I liked in terms of what he fit, like kind of similar to what we saw with CJ Gardner Johnson in terms of that like nickel safety hybrid. You could have him good kind of stylistically. I thought that it was a pretty good comp for what the Bears had last year in him. Um, and then actually the one guy that I don't know if DA is going to love him, but I do think he would work in a split safety in a too high system is Jalen Kilgore.
Mm.
He's a guy I really enjoy watching. I think would fit quite well. So like if you came out of like day 2 and you had either AJ Halsey, Kilgore, Genesis Smith, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, you talked about Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. The only reason I would be happy with him in 25, well, not the only reason. One of the reasons, the main reason I would be happy with him if he's a pick at 25, he fits our first criteria. He's a good football player.
He's a good football player, yeah.
He is a good football player. Happens to be a position of need, but you're not going to feel sorry about picking Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. He is a good football player, and I think he's going to play good football at a position of need for you for many years. So I would, trade up that kind of no. But if he shows up at 25 and you're looking around compared to edge rusher 4 or 5, safety possibly, maybe a 3 at that point, most likely. That I think would be kind of a lockdown sprint to the podium kind of pick. Supposedly a really good kid.
Do you think he fits well for the split safety system?
I think he does. I actually think he plays a lot like Kevin Byard. Like he's bigger than Byard, but his speed is kind of similar. Byard was not a guy that timed really well, but on the field he was smart and he got there quickly. Again, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren timed a little bit better, but we are talking about, decade plus later. Training methods have gotten better. He's a little bit bigger, but he plays in a similar, he's not a burner, but he's in the right place at the right time. He makes a lot of plays as well.
He produces. So
he produces. So yeah. I feel like I would feel a lot like that, like I did about the first pick last year, which is you got a good football player. You know how you're going to use him. You have an immediate role for him. I'm not sad about any of that. On to the next. Like that, that would be great. Other safeties, strangely enough, a lot of them are corners who people are projecting to safety. You talked about one of those. There's some other ones for me. A guy that there's 2 guys and they're right together. It would be one or the other. They're a little bit different for multiple reasons, but one of the guys that I know DA would absolutely love for play style is Keontae Scott. And I know everybody is saying, no, Keontae Scott's a corner. He doesn't need to be, folks. He is a really good football player, and he played a lot of football in the slot. I'm going to pull up the exact distribution because I have it here because I was looking it up when I was workshopping this particular theory, but he hits like a ton of bricks. He's great in run support. He had almost 200 reps in the box for Miami. He had 489 in the slot and 196 in the box. So don't tell me that guy can't be a 2-way safety. He absolutely can. His outside alignment, he only lined up outside 6 times for Miami. 6. So again, 196 in the box, 489 in the slot. He's already very familiar with playing down the alley and in the roll. He is a physical defender, has a ton of stops, ton of TFLs. He is aggressive as all get out. I love his makeup. I'm sure Ben would as well. And the other one is Traden Stukes, Genesis Smith's teammate from Arizona, who is old. And I know everybody gets fired up about that. He's 25 plus. But when I watch that guy play football, a little bit less of a run defender, but I love his range. I love his speed. He attacks from depth. I think he would make, a lot of people are saying he's a safety sort of anyways. Love Traden Stukes as long as they're comfortable with the player and again, age is going to be the major thing for them, but in terms of production, in terms of play style, in terms of willingness and smarts against the run, tackling fit, all that it all lines up. And hey, if he slides because of the age thing, even better. Really, really good football player. You mentioned Kamari Ramsey, and I want to bring up one guy down the board that not a lot of people are talking about that I really love, and it's his teammate Bishop Fitzgerald. I really like this Bishop Fitzgerald's tape. There are lapses, but you're talking about a guy that's anywhere from 260 to like 185 in consensus sports. He is all over the bottom of the I don't really care ranks. I'll tell you right now, folks, his tape is better than that. Like Bishop Fitzgerald is a good football player, played at a major program, was overshadowed by Ramsey. I think he outplayed Ramsey in terms of overall. And if you're a safety, you have to be consistent. If you miss, it's 6. And Bishop Fitzgerald played really good football going forward, going backwards. I really like his game. I think he'd be a tremendous value. Again, way, way down the board. And those are players you need. Even if he's not a starting safety for you, which I think he could be. I think he's that good. He would be a special teams demon for you right away. He'd be a third safety when you want to run, heavy dime, whatever. Very, very good value of a football player. And I think he's being slept on big time. So he's one of the safeties I really, really like. Anybody else you want to shout out? I know there's a million other folks. We are going to have other shows so we can talk about some of the positions we didn't get to, like tight end. Talk about some of the tackles if people want us to. We didn't even really talk about inside linebacker, did we?
There's one other safety that I didn't mention that.
Oh, who's that?
Again, I don't think he'll fit just because they got Kobe Bryant, and I think he's very similar in terms of like that ball hawking safety. But Bud Clark from TCU is one that's very fun to watch, but I don't think is actually going to fit for what the Bears want to do.
Yeah, he feels. And I had this discussion with somebody that writes about the team, their team. I said, man, he feels so Steelers coded to me. And I know that's Mike Tomlin and years, he feels so Steelers coded to me. Like I like him as a football player, but I'm with you. I don't think he's going to have the like coverage ability that DA really wants, but good football player. Before we get out of here, I have to do this because I'm curious. So I'm going to have you shout out inside linebacker, your like ideal target up high, and then a guy you like later on. Doesn't have to be super deep, like just like, later than the top, say 4 or 5, and then who you like lower down than that.
So high, I've 3 guys. Three guys altogether. You mentioned one of them last week. So Jacob Rodriguez was a guy I was like, I'm gonna watch a little bit of him. I already know he's like been touted highly, and I watched him for way longer than I should have because I needed to move on.
He's a great player. I love Jacob Rodriguez.
Yeah, I like Jacob Rodriguez. Jake Galladay from Cincinnati is another one that I enjoyed watching, and again watched a little bit more than I expected to watch. So those are 2 guys I think like Jacob Rodriguez might be high second round, Galladay mid to late second round I'd be fine with. There's two guys that are very interesting. One purely because I actually don't even know what position he's going to play.
Lewis.
And it's Kyle Lewis from Pitt.
Yeah.
And because
for sure.
He just looks like he gets shot out of the cannon every time he's on the field. But you worry about the size, or in terms of the size of him, how is he going to be in terms of his run fits and stuff like that, and when he has to make tackles, and because there's certain games that you watch and there's issues there. But again, he's small. I think he's a little bit smaller, but in terms of that like hybrid guy in the middle, that's just like an athletic freak. I went to but it was a couple of years ago, probably 6 or 7 years, maybe, when Jock was coming out from Notre Dame. Whereas that like kind of hybrid guy that nobody really knew like where he was going to go, and then he got picked as like, I think it was the first pick of the second round. I don't see Lewis at the same area, but like again, that guy that has been transitioned from like safety to linebacker, but where does he really fit in
Yeah.
at the next level? But he's fun to watch. So he was one. There's two guys. So one I liked Deontay Lawson from Alabama. Um, and then one of the others was Caleb Alarms. Or I liked
Mhm.
the one that I found the most interesting because I don't know if he's gonna play linebacker or edge. Is Barham from Michigan.
Yeah,
Um,
Jayshon Barham.
yeah, I really like how he plays. I don't care where you play him. Like
Yeah.
that,
He
he's
he
when
plays with
people
his hair
say
on
he's a
fire for
football
sure.
player,
Yeah.
like that's what I get from him, and it's one where if they picked him, I'd be like, I could see why that would be a selection that DA would make. But yeah, there's a lot of linebackers that you can look at it that like even when you go further down the board. But like I said, if you're looking like round 3, if you came away with like Alarms or like I was fairly happy with kind of what he was able to do.
Yeah.
Again, I do have some types of questions with in terms of how he'll shed blocks and his
That's the
ceiling
thing
in
about
terms of
any player
coverage.
at that level, though. You're gonna have questions, and it's
Yeah.
about whether or not they can overcome them. I'm the
I
same as you.
yeah,
Jacob Rodriguez up high. Golday is a guy. Was actually the first guy I watched in this entire draft, and I was very pleasantly surprised. Um, but Jacob Rodriguez, I did a thing on him back in November. I got to meet
he's
him at the
awesome.
combine. I like him even more. And again, you keep watching him because you're watching all the Texas Tech guys, and you're just like, man, he made another play. He made another play. So Rodriguez would be the guy I'd love to see up high. That would be the absolute dream. Farther on down, Bryce Betcher from Oregon, I think
Yeah,
is
he's good.
wildly underrated. Gold Glove center fielder, great hands, loves to hit people, really good size, good speed. Way better than the middle linebacker they sent to the Chiefs last year. Really like Betcher. Tareen York is really interesting to me, undersized, but plays like an absolute dynamo. Caleb Alarmzor, good all-arounder if you don't get one of those 3 or 4 guys up high, and he's sitting there at anywhere between 130 and 180. You grab him, and I think he would fit in the rotation really nicely. And then deep down the board, 200s ballpark, Red Murdoch from Buffalo. Love him. He's
Yeah.
Sean Dolak's dude. I really like Red. He didn't run super fast. That guy hits like a ton of bricks. He would be a Chicago legend. People in Chicago would love his style. He's going to make you pay. And you said Kyle Lewis, everybody talks about Lewis and always the best pass coverage linebacker. And I'm like, you could just stop with best pass coverage, like interior player. I don't know if he's going to play a linebacker. He's a great pass coverage guy. Guy that's very similar to me, but is getting absolutely no buzz is Harold Perkins Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He's smaller. He's fast. He's really good against the pass, especially in the short area. I don't really think he's a linebacker, but he is a great slot, like low slot coverage area guy. And you need that for tight ends, big tight ends, big slots, all those guys. You need the ability when the offense decides to flex those guys out. You need a guy that's really fast, can cover, and can still hit in the run fit. And Harold Perkins Jr. can do that, but he's way down there. He's like a 210. Again, I did work on him last draft. I thought he was coming out. He, declared, went back. But again, point we're trying to make here with inside linebacker, lots of flavors, lots of variations. You can definitely swing one in this draft, and I would expect the Bears to do that. All right. I think we need to answer questions and get out of here because I need to go pick my kids up so they don't start calling. I wanted to get to Nick Urshevsky's question from earlier on. Super Chat for $19.99. Very generous. Thank you, Nick. I've heard EJ not being super high on Kedrick Falk. Now we're talking about the edge or defensive end, I would say. What would be an ideal edge fit for the Bears in terms of value? We know the type of edge DA likes. Also, how much of a need is center and left tackle? I think we talked about those. So I'll really talk about Falk and edge. Like Falk is an athletic marvel, 6'6", almost 280. Guys his size should not move like he does. He is really good against the run. And I don't mean like edge setting, boring run stuff. I mean like blowing up run plays. He is an explosive defender against the run. That is also very valuable as a defender. It is not as valuable statistically as blowing up pass plays, which is why guys with high sack totals and high pressure totals get paid. He has an extremely low pressure and sack total. He does not finish, even on a very talented defense, which is why there's all the questions about him. Again, it's back to Moneyball. If he's such a good hitter, why doesn't he hit good? If he's such a great athlete off the edge and he's so good against the run, which he is, why isn't he good against the pass? And a lot of people think, hey, because coaches will always say this, I can fix him. I can turn the switch, just a couple adjustments, and he could be. He has the potential to be that. But if you're drafting potential that high up and what you're getting is a very high floor run stopper, you might be overpaying because he might never be more than that. He could be, but you don't know. It's the sort of box in a boat thing. Well, what's in the box? Well, it could be a boat. Well, I already have a boat. In terms of ideal edge fit, I mentioned earlier in the chat, I really like Gabe Akis. He wrestling background. Again, not a high, he's a very similar player to Falk in that he's very physical. He's got really good size. He's got quote unquote DA size. Wrestles every year in the off season. Doesn't have high pass rush production. His pass rush production is as good as Falk's. It's even a little bit better. But you're not going to pay as much for Akis as you are for Falk. Falk is going to go maybe 20 picks earlier than Akis. So if the Bears, managed to hang around and Akis was there at 57, I'd be cool with it. He's a good fit. I think he's got a high floor in DA's system, and he could develop as a pass rusher just like Falk could because he's a very good athlete. He's got a wrestling background. It's not quite as big. It's not quite as fast, but he is big and pretty darn fast. So that's a really good player that I like. Let me take a quick look at edges. What's your thought about fit for edge?
I like Falk as when you look at if you had to imagine a player that DA wants, he fits like a glove. I don't think he's going to be there. If he did fall, I would be happy knowing that. Again, I think he's a good football player. Like you said, there's some limitations, especially from this year, in terms of his production, rushing the passer. The whole thing will be what you think you can get out of him and how much more you can bring out of him. I know he's very, very young in terms of coming into this, and like you just look at it as if you're drafting Akeem Mesidor who's like 25, and then you're looking at Falk who's 21. Like it's almost an entire contract. It's an interesting one.
Interesting question, because you brought those two guys up and you put them side by side.
Yeah.
Let's just say they both drop. Now, I don't think they will. I think actually probably neither of them will drop. But let's just say, hypothetically, weird stuff happens at the top of the draft, and Mesidor and Falk are both there at 25. Who do you take?
Who do I take, or who do the Bears take?
No, who do you take? This is a what Kieran will do question.
I think Akeem Mesidor is a better pass rusher than Keldrick Falk. Who I think the Bears would take, I think they would take Keldrick Falk.
I know, and it drives me bananas because I don't care about Mesidor's age. He is going to hit the ground running. I think you'd be a good fit physically, play style wise. He is a much more accomplished pass rusher, which the Bears desperately need pass rush for all the reasons we've talked about, all the reasons you know. Yeah. I would be, if Akeem Mesidor is there at 25, I would be jumping up and down, and I would take him in a heartbeat. And because you're going to get the production right now.
Just because there's so many
edge rushers. Possible. It's possible that either one of them could end up there. I don't think both will. But if he's there specifically, for me, it's like Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. Like position of need, good football player. Like I have no worries about Akeem Mesidor being a good football player. He is a very good football player. Done, bang, turn the card in. Be happy about your first day and move on. So any other questions we have to answer in the next 5 minutes before my kids start calling?
Let's see, what else did Mike throw in here? I know they spoke with the comp picks that the Bears are still going after that. We'll see how that goes.
Oh yeah, comp picks. Oh boy.
Yeah, we'll see. It would be nice,
They're
but
still at. I
I
mean, it'd be
don't.
nice. I'm not going to hold out hope, especially not for this draft. They'd probably, if I think the compromise would be, they would give them to him for next year, which would be even better, quite
Would be
frankly.
awesome.
It'd be so
Yeah.
amazing to end up with extra picks, or one this year, one next year. I could see, but again, those would all help. They'd be very nice. There's no reason for the NFL not to give them to him. It's gotten to be a bit of a farce at this point.
Yeah. Let's, I guess there's a couple ones in terms of one saying with Paul stressing best player available. Now they
Mm.
mentioned kind of CJ Allen and Colton Hood, but like, let's say we did get to
Oh my
25
God.
and
If
you
Colton
are,
Hood's there,
mhm,
I love him as a player. Like, he is a good football player.
that's one actually that I think from the scenario that you put out earlier, where
Mhm.
if it was just the Clemson guys there, if that's the case, and like let's just say like Tiananmen and McNeil Warren have just gone
Sure.
right before as well,
Yep.
and they like 6 or 7 of the edge rushers. I wouldn't be surprised if the pick at 25 would be a corner. And I
I
think a lot of people don't expect it, but I think
Yeah.
we know there was a lot of smoke about the Bears being interested in corners and free agency, and it didn't really work out because the price got too high.
Yep.
So that makes me think if they were willing to invest, and there was one in particular that they came fairly close to signing, but got more money from elsewhere. If they were
Yeah.
going to
If
invest money
I
there, they would
I'll tell
invest
you
in a high
right
draft pick.
now, Bears fans, if Colton Hood is there and they pick him, I know there's going to be huge cry. It's still a defensive pick, so I get it. And the corner depth chart looks really good if you squint. It looks really good at the top level if everybody stays healthy. Did everybody stay healthy last year? Not even close.
Nope.
And if you sort of dig just underneath that surface and look into next year and even this year with a couple of injuries, it doesn't look great. If you are staring at Colton Hood at 25 and you like him as a football player, I love him as a football player, like as a long-term defensive starter outside for the Bears. No questions, no nickel, no safety conversion, like starter takeaway corner outside who has tremendous physical skill, really good size, very savvy player for the position. I would, again, if you're talking about get a good football player and walk out of day one, Colton Hood would check every single box.
We've spoken a lot about moving back and potential guys at 25. Is there anybody that you would
Oh, hold the phone
be
and not move
okay
back?
with? No, is there anybody you would be okay with them moving up for?
Oh boy. I, unless they got a hometown discount, unless they got some kind of value, I don't think so. I
Nope, no prospect out
I
there that you would want that if
well,
they were falling.
I mean, crazy stuff, but it feels weird talking about crazy. Like if Caleb Downs is falling for some
Mhm.
unknown reason, like Caleb Downs is a legit Terminator.
Yeah.
He's like as if you had when you play the computer on all Madden and you get so frustrated because the defensive players are always in the right spot and they always make the play and they're always anticipating. And you're just like, that's not real. That's Caleb Downs. Like, that's Caleb Downs tape. He is
Mhm.
such a good football player. Like,
Yeah.
is he going to be there though? No, he's going to
No.
be off the board. So it's not really worth talking about.
I'm
But
just
like,
hoping he doesn't end up in the division, to be fair.
yeah, right. He is one of those for sure. He is such a good football player. You could say the same thing about a bunch of other guys for Ohio State, but I they would have to fall a ways. I'm just looking at I mean, same thing with Mansour Delane, but he's not going to get outside the top 10.
Mhm.
Um, I wouldn't do it for the wide receivers, even though they're really good. Oh, I do know one that you could tempt me with. Spencer Fano.
Mm.
If Spencer Fano, for some reason, which he won't, started to slide, I would pick him in a heartbeat. He is a very good, and I would play him an offensive tackle without a doubt.
Mm.
So
What if What if someone that you fully expected to be in the top 10 was starting to slide? So guys like Ruben Dane.
Yeah, no, if Bane's starting to slide, I'm calling for sure, but the
Hmm.
price is going to be prohibitive, and it's where that starts to tip over for the Bears. And he's not going to go very far outside the top 10. So you're talking about
Yeah,
15 picks
probably.
in the
Yeah.
first round. That's half the first round. They are the most valuable picks by far in the draft value scale. You're talking about a king's ransom to move up. Is he a great player? Yes. Do I love him? Yes. Would he fit on the Bears? Sure would. Like, would I, empty the coffers to go get him in a pick where you've already got some really big gulfs in terms of picks, some huge gaps? I don't. It's a fun question though, of like
Hmm.
which guy and how much. So I think again, all the kind of top guys. I wouldn't do it for Love, even though that sounds hilarious.
Hmm.
Jeremiah Love's amazing player. Um, I definitely wouldn't do it for Monroe Freeling, like one of the
Nah.
project tackles. Like that's too rich for my blood. I like Thieneman a lot. I think he'd be a great fit. Would I give up a lot given that there's other safeties that we've talked about that I like in this draft? I wouldn't. Fano's a little bit different. You don't find athletes like Fano at tackle. And he's already a really good tackle. Like he already plays
Plug and
tackle
play.
very well. What's that? Yeah, he's
You
he's
plug and play.
such a good football player. The guards, it's going to be tough for me to do that for a guard in the first round. Now, a more interesting question is if the board gets cleaned out in a very particular way and Emmanuel Pregnon's sitting there at 25, do you go, well, I'm not going to be sad. He's an awesome football player and we're good to go at the interior forever. So not many. I did see one where Sadiq fell the other day, and Kenyon Sadiq doesn't often fall. And I wouldn't move up to get him, but let me tell you, if Kenyon Sadiq's sitting there at 25, Ben Johnson's gonna kill everybody in the room to get him. Like
I
he's not gonna let that
I
go.
was trying to do a mock draft yesterday to do I do mock drafts very differently than most people, and I always have to
Sure.
caveat it on when I post them because I don't really post loads of them. That I don't really do them for the individual players. I do it based on the strategy of the positions.
Right.
Um,
And what
and
you
I
can
was
get later.
yeah, and I was
Yep.
planning on doing one as if they did take like offensive line in the first round. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this and I'll post it, blah blah. And then I get there in 25 and Kenyon Sadiq is there.
Uh-huh. And you're
And I was
like,
like, and
okay, this is a fascinating thought exercise. What would happen here? And I
I
legit
I
think
I
Ben
I
would
took I took him
he
and I
would
was
ring
like,
their
I'm
name.
not posting this, but I'm
Yeah.
taking him.
Yeah. I think Ben would ring people's necks in the room because he's a really good blocker. Like Colson Loveland was underrated as a blocker last year. Sadiq's the same way. I don't think he's quite as good a blocker as Loveland, but I actually don't think he's far off. He bows up on the outside a lot more than people give him credit for. So it's a fascinating question, but
That
NB Law 95 says the question I thought you were asking. Um, okay, who are the players where if I'm a 25 and somebody calls me, I'm not doing it? Mesidor's one because I
mhm,
think he's a lockdown fit. Um, Thieneman, if he got there, would also be the same. I would just pick him because I think you are better off for that. Um,
Colton Hood.
Pat, Colton Hood, I think, is actually I think he is going to be there at 25. So
Mhm,
I don't know that I I would listen at that
mm.
point for sure. Like Mesidor, I might listen, but I think the drop off from I don't think Mesidor is going to be there in the first place. Um, so like Thieneman, Mesidor,
Where would you
um,
be if it was McNeil Warren was there?
I would listen because there are other
Mhm,
safeties I like you said, I really like Mini War. I think I might be higher on him than you are, but I'm not like
mhm.
in love with him. It's not a,
Yeah,
Caleb Downs or Spencer Fano situation where I'm like, no, forget it. We're taking him 100%. Don't bother calling. Like I would still take the call because I don't think he's irreplaceable. And yes, there's a drop off, but it's not severe. And there are other good safeties in this draft who I would take because I think it's a
for
deep safety draft. So it's
yeah,
mostly about depth, right? If like in the edge class, there's definitely a drop off, and you're talking about guys that don't have great edge production after those guys, and you're really projecting. And we've talked about most of those guys. So probably those guys are, if edge drops into your lap, you just take them. I don't really think there's a DT. Um, any of the top tackles, again, the guys that aren't getting out of the top 10, Maui Noah, Fano,
I
those
think it's probably
guys,
just
I
a
would,
surprise, right? Like,
yeah,
if it's someone that like although we see it every year, it always seemed
yep,
like what happened to the Ravens, that it was like when it come to them, you're like, how did this guy get to
yeah,
this part of
and
the draft?
that's
Like,
what
that's
Poles has
the
to do.
only situation. And
That's what
like,
he's got to do is just let it come to him because something will happen. They have enough needs all over the defense, couple on offense. There's enough good players in this draft. And look, if somebody calls, cool, man. Like, like if they want them more than you and you don't really want them, fine. Like, you don't have to let that on. Like,
mhm,
take a decent trade down, get picks. If you think your guy is still going to be available, it does happen. You can be like, oh no, for sure. Again, you play the smokescreen. No, we really want Jordan Tyson. No, absolutely. You can't have him. You're going to have to pay out the nose for him. And somebody blows you away with an offer because they love Jordan Tyson. Like, take it. Like, take
mhm,
what the draft gives you. And if the Bears do that, they're coming out of this class with a bunch of good players. I hope they get more picks because, as if you're taking anything away from today's stream, it's that there are lots of good players up and down the board, especially in some of the areas that the Bears need. Again, we're going to be back to you pretty soon. We've been having some decent sized gaps in the offseason, but Trevor said he's willing to hop on. So we're going to do that pretty soon. Might be next week. Certainly will be by the week after at the latest. But we'll
mhm.
talk about some of these other positions, and we might even run him through a little 3-round Bears mock and see what
Mhm. So
Trevor
what
would
he'll
do.
do,
Yeah, it'd be
he can
fun.
be Paul's for the day.
That's right. He would love it. He would love it. But we love all of you. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for hanging out with us, listening to us talk about the draft and all the Bears needs, where they fit, where they don't. As always, send your questions in, put them in the comments. We'll look at them for next time as well. And until then, hang out and just try and deal with draft fatigue. DJ said one of my favorite things. He said the draft process is long. Don't get bored with good players. And it's excellent advice. So we will see you pretty shortly.